Once upon a time there was an esports dream that Wizards of the Coast wanted Magic to rival that of Hearthstone's esports game. Then Blizzard sacked that off and esports for card games kinda went down the shitter. MTG Arena, a digital client for Magic the Gathering that I have a love-hate relationship with, is a relic of that time. It was designed, briefed, and brought into existence. It was pooped out of the butthole of Wizards of the Coast during that time. I don't know why I chose those words. Personally, I really enjoy Arena in its current iteration. I think it's been through a lot of rough spots, and I think the economy is probably the best it's ever been with the gold pack scenario. I still think it's too expensive, and I really think, if they just downshift all the random rares in Timeless, like Lightning Bolt and Brainstorm, the application, the whole thing would be a lot better as a thing I suggest to people to play Magic on. Literally chatting to some of the old guard, people who've been playing Magic for years, but only recently got into Command at my local store, saying that they were thinking of getting into Arena, and asking me how expensive was it to play in the long-standing legacy style format, Timeless. And I had to explain to them that all these cards were rare. Anyway, that's not what this video is, but it's the one thing that really still bugs me about Arena, and I wish they'd fix it. As a gesture of love to the community, it would be so good. But because of the focus on esports and the fact that Arena was birthed in a time when Commander was incredibly popular, but not quite the popularity that it's ballooned to now, thanks to a multitude of factors, online content, the pandemic, and similar, we had no intention from Wizards to ever have Commander on the Arena client. It was just not ever even considered as a thing they need to include. The funny thing about it is that Magic the Gathering Online, the ancient one that looks like MS-DOS being put through a meat grinder, this actually has Magic the Gathering's multiplayer Commander format on it, with pretty much the vast majority of cards. There is a whole video that will come out later this week or next week where I'm going to talk about how the vast majority of cards actually means that a lot of the new stuff isn't making it to Modo, and it's not making it to Arena either. A lot of the Universes Beyond contracts are an absolute mess, and I'll talk about that in a different video. But then came the Alchemy cards attached to Murders at Markov Manor. Now, some of you are going to get really upset in the comments and say how Alchemy cards are evil. I think you're being silly and a bit childish. I'll be honest, I really am. Like, I get the idea that you want Magic to be a paper game that can be played, but the fact that there are formats that aren't even available in paper, like for example Timeless and Alchemy, but those formats having special unique cards is no different to Legacy having cards that Modern doesn't. For the record, I'm a big fan of digitally unique cards within formats like Timeless specifically. I do wish that there would be all the other formats like Pioneer and Modern and Legacy without them, but in Timeless specifically, I like these, and Brawl. What I dislike is the rebalanced cards. Cards should do what they do in every format. We don't need cards with the same art and same name doing different things. That's absurd. This video is not meant to be a laundry list of the problems of Arena. Anyway, the Alchemy cards. There's this card, Juggle the Performance. Each player discards their hand, then conjures a duplicate of each of 7 random cards from the library of the player to the right into their hand. The duplicates perpetually gain mana of any type can be spent to cast this spell. That's a lot to unpack. Conjuring, to an extent duplication, and perpetually are all mechanics that are unique to the digitally unique cards. Perpetual is a way that affects a card that then remains through zones. So if you perpetually change the mana cost or the power of a creature or a spell, and then you move back to your hand, it keeps that stat change. Conjures, where you create a new copy of a card that then exists in all zones. So if you were to discard a conjured copy of a card, it would go to the graveyard as opposed to stop existing, like the token or duplicated copies we see in paper Magic. And duplication is an effect that we kind of see in paper, but when it pertains to duplicating an existing card and have that card exist as a object that can move into different zones, we don't. With that all unpacked, the really unique thing is how it references the player to your left. Think about it. There's only one player to your left. It's 1v1. Let's unpack that, shall we? If you're looking to pick up a single product or sealed product, use the link in the description below to coolstuffinc.com to get 5% off your order. Help support the show. If you use the code Kenobi, you'll get an Orc Army token, and also every order gets a free random foil at the moment. So get involved. Juggle the Performance refers to the player to your left, in much the same way that many Commander cards also refer to the player to your left. And by many, I mean a handful. Specifically, the phrase player to your left only appears on 5 paper Magic cards. I know it says right. I'll catch that in a moment in the video, live, right in front of your faces. But referring to a player to your left or to your right is specifically designed to help with multiplayer. And by multiplayer, I don't mean online competitive or competitive. I mean having more than 2 players at the table when I'm talking about Magic. At the moment, Arena doesn't have that. So it makes you think, oh, well, this is being designed for Commander, right? Is it future-proofing or a hint at what's to come? If Commander was planned for the client right now, right this moment, there would have been an announcement. Wizards like to announce their announcements of announcements. Wizards do not keep quiet about this stuff. Also, Commander coming to Arena would be a huge boon for the client and probably boost downloads, sales, and usage statistics already before the format even shows up, because people are more likely to invest for that reason, because Commander is so popular. That said, would Commander on Arena be good? I'll come to that at the end of the video. Is it a hint at a much longer future? Well, perhaps not. I think that, like I said, if they had a plan for it, it would be a conversation being had right now. However, this could easily be either future-proofing or it could be weird code. When it comes to Arena and to Magic the Gathering Online, both of them are known for being a bit of a clusterfuck when it comes to coding. I am not a computer tech guy, and there's going to be at least one Arena developer watching this, I know who you are, who's going to be annoyed at me for even trying to touch on this. But the point I'm getting at is that Magic is an incredibly complicated game, and thus maintaining not only the rule system of how the cards interact, but how those rules are presented to the player is a huge undertaking. On top of that, this is conjecture and what's the word I'm looking for? It's my theory, it's not something I can definitely guarantee. But with the layoffs recently and the lack of funding that I seem to perceive when it comes to Arena and Modo, I wouldn't be surprised if the teams are too small to manage these tasks. I generally think the people that work for the Arena development team, as well as Daybreak Games managing Magic the Gathering Online, do good jobs with the resources they've got. I've always said, and will always bang this drum, that I think that more money being spent on giving those people more time and more resources like other people to work with them would improve the stability of those clients, the projects that they can work on, the release schedules, and so on. So there's a small chance that a player to your left, I've just realized it says player to your right. I'm not going to re-record the whole video. I've already been recording for like 8 minutes. I can't believe I thought it was left. I swear it said left. There's actually 7 cards that reference players to your right if we don't include Cheaty Face in that. That one just says right away. Anyway, the reason it says right might just be that's the way it needs to be programmed for this specific thing to work, through layers and layers of complicated interactions that we aren't privy to understanding because we don't get to see the code. There's a wonderful article that I will link to in the description below. It's called Why I Decided Not to Do Emrakul and How We Shipped It Anyway. It's a peek behind the curtain. Ian Adams, the manager of products or card sets at Arena, he is talking about how they were not going to do Emrakul the Promised End when they did Shadows of Innistrad Remastered. That would have been a huge mistake. I'm really glad they went back on that decision. The main reason they went back on that decision was how he talked about people in the team have their own time to use and utilize to cover things that they might want to cover within the project. Discretionary work time. He talked specifically about how Andy Rife was the engineer that came to him to volunteer his discretionary time to make Emrakul work as a passion project. If it wasn't for Andy's passion, well, maybe someone else would have picked it up, but we might actually have Emrakul on the client, which I think would be a big loss overall for Magic and the formats where Emrakul is legal. Stories like this show the passion of the Arena development team for Magic and for making Magic what it is, which is the best game ever made. Some cards are just much more complicated than others in terms of how much time and energy multiple engineers, developers, and programmers might have to devote to making it work within the confines of what the current Arena system allows. Emrakul the Promised End, as an example of this, is a card that at first glance you're like, well, you just take another player's turn, right? It can't be that complicated. But on top of like all the weird interactions that has with existing Magic rules and the Magic rules engine itself that functions usually by us, making it work with paper rectangles, it also adds all sorts of other issues around UI, how the UI works, how the interaction of the player with the user interface works when you're not controlling your turn but the other player is taking it. He mentions how it's like complicated about how you pass priority between yourself and them because the Arena app was never designed to allow you to pass priority to yourself in another seat, and so on and so on and so on. But they got it to work eventually. Big props to them for actually doing the work and getting Emrakul onto the client, because it's a big success story. So that brings me back to wondering if Juggle the Performance's mentioning of the player to your right, not to your left like I thought earlier, but the player to your right, if that's just some weird quirk of having to code it this way. Or the other option, like I said, is that it's an Arena developer going out of their way in their own discretionary time to implement a new wording that works in a way that can pass to a seat that is currently empty. They may be putting the building blocks in place so that one day, through the discretionary work time or work time allocated to them by their managers or their overlords at WotC Hasbro, will allow them to actually turn the client into a multiplayer client where we can play Two-Headed Giant, for example, as their first step, which was something that was available on Duels of the Planeswalkers back in the day. And then from there, from Two-Headed Giant, we moved to Commander and other multiplayer formats. And I need to hasten to add this point as well, because I often see people say, why don't they just put Commander on Arena, as if they can just click their fingers and do that. Of course, it requires pre-planning, setup. You know, it's much easier to do something when you plan for it, pre-recording, pre-creation, pre-setup of engine, instead of trying to fix it in post, as we see in many industries. The fact that, like, Commander would make them a load of money does make it make sense. And a lot of people would like to see it, and more people would be invested in the client if it came. So it makes business sense ultimately, but I guess the real question is, how difficult is it to bring Commander to Arena? And ultimately, I think it's probably very, very hard. And I mean, most people can understand this, right? This is not simply programming a new mechanic. This isn't putting life from the Lone One Arena. This is figuring out how to have the client present 4 boards, to allow you to interact with and look at those 4 boards, to allow turn priority passing and all the million extra things that multiplayer Magic adds to the plot. That's before we get to those intricacies of how we make it look on Arena, act on Arena, interact on Arena. And then there's also the element of conversation and discussion and politicking. I'll come to that more in a moment. Either way, it is not easy. So just please, let's all respect that fact. And whilst it's not easy, we also have to acknowledge that Hasbro makes billions of dollars. Like, Magic is a billion-dollar property, independent of everything else. So they have the resources to be able to hire more staff and support their development teams if they wanted to. I guess they just don't want to, because it doesn't make the immediate line go up right here, because the Commander project or anything similar would be further down the line. Hasbro are absolutely concerned of making sure that Wizards makes as much money as humanly possible right now to keep their stocks and share prices afloat. Which brings us to the big question. It's not the main one on the front of this video, because none of y'all will watch it if I say this, but the question really is, do we want Commander on Arena? Will it even be good? The Arena client has its fair share of issues. One of the problems that I have with it is just how cold the interaction between myself and my opponent can be. On Magic the Gathering Online, you have a chat function, which is often usually either not used or full of salt, but there is the third option, which is, or third and fourth. The third one is you can ask questions about your opponent's deck, what you did wrong or what they're playing when you're interested by it. I've done that in the past and it's led to full-on conversations. Hell, I followed someone on Twitter because I had a conversation with them in the chat log of a Modo game at the end of a match once. And beyond that, in a unique case, people just tell me that they love my content and it's cool to play against me on Modo in the chat function. That's cool. Unique to a creator, but that's cool. Without that chat functionality and no voice over IP either, because it's not useful in the client right now, there'll be a very difficult situation for being able to actually communicate with people. And Commander is very important about communication. The system and the app might handle all your game actions and the resolution of such, which is often a huge boon for the use of complicated board states and similar. Look at Scoot Swarm. That's a card that doesn't really work in paper. But without communication, how the hell are you going to politic? How the hell are you going to ask the table if they've got an answer to our problems? So that brings a whole other extra layer on top of the already existing problem of adding 2 extra players and all the baggage that adds to the UI design and how the app currently works. That adds a whole other layer of baggage of having to add a whole other new system that currently doesn't actually exist in the program. And beyond that, there's the argument that digital Commander kind of sucks. I get it. I've always found that Modo's Commander is better when I'm in a voice call with 3 of my friends, and that might be the primary way we use Arena. And at that point, why aren't you using TTS or Cockatrice or similar? Because what's the point in using an app if it can't handle all those functions for you? I get that. And I've been roped plenty and played with people who are way too slow on Arena. Plentiful. Pretty much every day I play against someone who's playing way too slow on Arena. But those are minor issues when it comes to being able to pair into someone and play Commander anytime whilst you're having a shit. Probably don't do that. You'll get really bad piles if you play a whole game of Commander with your arsehole hanging loose over a toilet. Or late at night or early morning or on your laptop in a hotel room. There's always upsides for being able to play Commander anywhere, anytime, which we don't currently have on Arena. So it won't be the perfect experience. It won't quite be playing with your mates around a table laughing with a few beers, but it would be a good stand-in when you can't physically do that. I hope one day we see Commander on Arena. It's not something I'm going to bang a drum about and scream from the rooftops for, but it's cool to see them perhaps future-proofing for that situation. There is a nightmare scenario where they go ahead and make a new app or a new program that is able to do Commander alongside the rest of Magic, like Arena 2.0. And then we have to do this thing where we can port our collections over. Porting the collection over, absolutely fine. They didn't do that for Modo and Arena, don't forget, so there's that issue there. But If that was a porting situation to a new program, absolutely fine. If we see Moto to Arena style jumps where we lose our collection again, or similar to how Jewels of the Planeswalkers implemented microtransactions, and then made people think they can build a collection and play real Magic on digital platforms, and then it got shot in the back of the head, and from its corpse erupted Arena, a barely functioning program at times. Yeah, that would suck ass if that happened again. I trust they wouldn't do that. Trust is a weird word. I'm sure they wouldn't do that. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.